UPS driver gets secret message with woman's package, calls authorities. Upon pulling up to the driveway, the house seemed empty, everything was quiet. After knocking on the door, Mrs. Jordan handed him the package. It wasn't immediately apparent to him. However, as he went to load the package, something caught his eye on the box's side. The scrawled words on the side caused him to feel a sick wave of worry. As a Navy veteran, Charles Gordon recognized that something wasn't right. As a result of all his years of training, he had mastered the ability to pick up on subtle details that most men would miss. He would, however, be put to the test on that day. His diligence and expertise on the spot were beyond the capabilities of most men. Amid the conflict's peak, Gordon had been deployed to Afghanistan during its most vicious period. There were things he saw that irreversibly changed the way he saw life. After returning home, some of his comrades were no longer the same as they had been before. According to Gordon, about half of his fellow servicemen suffer from PTSD today. In his case, he was among the fortunate few to have been able to reach home without any serious setbacks. The topic still darkened his expression every time he discussed it. He was a UPS driver now at age 55, and he enjoyed his work and the gentle pace that came along with it. Compared to his time in the Navy, this was quite a change. He had no idea what was about to happen. As a result of his reputation in Missouri, Charles had gained quite a following. As he traveled throughout the county, he met many new people. With his packages, he developed special relationships with all recipients. He knew their names, and they knew his. Yet Charles had a secret that was unknown to his clients until one fateful day. It was unknown to Missouri residents that the UPS driver had the skills and expertise to save them from danger, even if it meant putting his own life at risk. Until it almost proved too late, they had no idea how lucky they were that the ex-U.S. Navy SEAL was looking out for them. He didn't realize just what he was getting himself into when he was asked to fetch a package from a Franklin County home. This house and its owners were familiar to him. Mrs. Jordan and Mr. Jordan appeared to be a normal couple from the outside. On one occasion, their behavior seemed a little unusual. As soon as the unsettling incident ended, he remembered delivering a package to the Jordans' house a few months ago. As he walked with the package in his hand, he remembered getting out of his truck and knocking on their door. Immediately, he was intrigued by what he saw in the package. A name or address wasn't attached to the package, it was anonymous. A return address is required most of the time for UPS to collect packages from the sender's home. UPS does not normally allow anonymous shipping. However, if you do not want the recipient, or UPS, to know who sent the package, you can leave it at a UPS depot. What would be the point of doing that? In addition, the package seemed suspiciously bulky. Normally, Charles has no interest in what's inside people's packages, but this time he felt there was something off about it. In an attempt to determine its contents, he shook the package in his hands. A bulky, compact object was inside, but he wasn't sure what it was. The Jordan's door opened right then. A man opened the door. It was Mr. Jordan. Immediately, Charles tried to keep his composure, hiding the fact that he had been trying to guess the content of the package. That had been quite unprofessional of him. He handed the package to Mr. Jordan. The man looked at both sides of the street before taking the package like he didn't want to be seen. Then, he rapidly grabbed it with both hands and disappeared behind the closed door. Now, what was that about? The whole episode made Charles feel like there had to be something fishy about that package. But what could it be? Well, it was done. He just hoped he wouldn't get into trouble. After some weeks, he completely forgot about that incident, but he remembered again as soon as he saw he had to deliver another package to the Jordans' house. It had started out as a quiet, cold morning for Charles. He hummed as he plotted his route and wound his way through Franklin County, picking up and delivering the parcels he had been assigned. When he reached the Jordan residence, he pulled up into the drive like he always did and walked up the front steps. He had no idea that he was walking into a living nightmare. Charles knocked on the door 3 times and waited the cursory 5 minutes before knocking again. Stomping his feet to keep warm, he glanced over his shoulder and saw Mr. Jordan's pickup truck in the parking bay. But he got no response. He didn't hear a peep from inside the house either. What could be going on? "Hello," he yelled, UPS. Perhaps nobody was home after all. He scanned the porch for the parcel he was meant to be picking up. No package. Maybe they had called him by mistake. But Charles was starting to feel uneasy. He could tell that something was very wrong. He was just about to turn and leave when he heard the front door unlatch. The door opened a crack, and an eye appeared. "Mrs. Jordan?" "I'm here to collect a package," Charles explained. The door widened, and she stood there, smiling tightly. Then, Mr. Jordan stepped out from behind his wife and greeted Charles tersely. He held his wife close and ordered her to give the UPS driver the package. But as she did, something in her eyes told Charles that something just wasn't right. In the brief moment when Mrs. Jordan handed him the package, she mouthed something to him, but he couldn't quite catch it. She looked nervously at her husband to make sure he hadn't seen her, and then her eyes widened. She was trying to tell him something. But why couldn't she say it in front of her husband? Charles took in her appearance as best he could before the door was hurriedly slammed shut again. All the clues were there. Her hair was disheveled, and she had dark rings under her tired eyes. And her eyes, they were pleading with him to do something. She looked like a frightened animal. And the way that Mr. Jordan had held her close. There was just something he didn't like about it. He was concerned at first, but tried to shrug the feeling of worry off. Maybe he was being paranoid. After all, what his clients did behind closed doors wasn't any of his business. Maybe the couple had had an argument. That must be it, he reasoned, before walking back to his truck. But when he put the parcel in the back, he saw what she had been trying to tell him all along. "Call 911" was scrawled on the side of the box, on the side that she had carefully kept facing away from her husband as she handed it to him. His heart began to race, and a metallic taste crept up his throat. He glanced back at the house and saw Mr. Jordan watching him coldly from the window. He instinctively knew that he had to act like nothing was wrong, or it would all be over. Charles climbed into his seat slowly and deliberately, as if he was in no hurry to get away from that place. He felt Mr. Jordan's eyes burning a hole in his back as he rolled away. It took all his self-control to resist the urge to speed out the driveway. But when he rounded the corner and out of sight, he pulled out his phone and slammed the numbers in. He heard the reassuring voice on the other end of the line, 911, "What's your emergency?" Then, he explained everything to the operator, the parcel, Mr. Jordan's behavior, and Mrs. Jordan's frightened eyes. The operator listened intently before sending out the sheriff's deputies. But they had no idea what was really happening in that house. Nothing could have ever prepared them for it. The team prepared for every eventuality. They weren't sure if they were dealing with a robbery or much worse. From the information Charles had given them, they assumed the couple were being held hostage. But they were all so very wrong. Like a well-oiled machine, they mobilized and raced to the scene. Everyone knew that time was of the essence. In less than 10 minutes, authorities were swarming the house on Willow Ford Road. Franklin County Sheriff Sergeant T.J. Wild led the operation. They stormed up the front steps and called. Mr. Jordan seemed like he had been taken by surprise. Now, the truth was about to come out. And it was far more unnerving than what anyone could have expected. But he refused to cooperate with the authorities, slamming the door in their faces. He didn't know that this was the worst mistake he could have made. Now, it was on for real. Now that they knew that what was going on had everything to do with Mr. Jordan, they weren't about to take it lying down. Sheriff Sergeant T.J. Wild checked Mr. Jordan's records and discovered that he had been arrested before. They also feared that he had a weapon inside the house. Realizing that the situation may have escalated beyond their control, they decided to call backup. They weren't going to take any risks, so they brought out the big guns. They called for the SWAT team. Mr. Jordan quickly realized that his best option was to surrender, which, thankfully for him, he did before the SWAT team arrived. Mrs. Jordan and her 3-year-old son were taken to a place of safety. But it was only when officers took Mrs. Jordan's statement that the truth about what had happened in that house came out. And thanks to Charles, Mrs. Jordan was released from a harrowing situation. We are grateful this UPS driver with more than a decade of service followed protocol when he saw a customer in distress and contacted authorities after he saw her message to contact 911, the company said in a statement. Our drivers are very familiar with their routes and are trained to be aware of their surroundings and respond to requests for assistance. According to Mrs. Jordan, her husband had snapped. He held her captive for 15 hours in the home they shared. When she tried to leave, he refused to let her. He threatened her, and she had reason to believe that her life was in danger. So she did the only thing she could think of. She wrote a note on the parcel for the UPS driver. James Jordan was promptly arrested and charged. He was held in Franklin County Jail with bail set at $100,000. The charges stemmed from actions that occurred in the home with the female victim prior to the arrival of the delivery service, who noticed a message for help written on a package he was to pick up, Franklin County Sheriff's Office said in a statement. If it weren't for the quick-thinking UPS driver, the situation might have been a lot worse.